Okay. The first one is that the labor market duality, the term was invented in the 80s to describe what was happening in Spain. And now it is applied to many other countries when we can see some contractual differences and so on. Do you think that the content, the meaning of labor market duality right now is the same as in the 80s, or is very much different?
Well, I think by dualism now we mean contractual dualism, because we do have a labor market in which there are the labor market is segmented among many different contractual types, and the differences across these contracts have increased, have widened quite significantly, because many countries have carried out two-tier reforms of the labor market in which they have kept the protection of the workers with open-ended contract unchanged, and they instead introduced this very temporary and very flexible contract, which are on the one hand fixed-term contract, but at the other extreme there are also many other contracts that are treated as self-employment, and which the entire risk, also the risk, the enterprise risk, is shifted onto the worker.
There is a discussion that that some of your work was related to the so-called honeymoon effect, and that sounds very nice, but the content might not be that nice. Could you please explain to the people who don't know that concept yet? What's the idea, and do you think that we actually can see? Were you able to identify that it is actually happening in some countries, and if so, and if yes, which one?
By honeymoon we mean the fact that the effect of a two-tier reform, one that increases flexibility only at the margin and related only to temporary contracts, in a contract having already rigid employment protection legislation, is that you may have, clearly if macroeconomic conditions are favorable, an increase in employment and a reduction of unemployment. The reason is that in these countries, as soon as you introduce this option for the employer, they have the room to adjust upwards employment, but do not have the room to adjust it downwards, because they still have in their firm workers with the permanent contract. So as long as the economy does well, you do have an increase in average employment levels or a reduction in unemployment. But as soon as macroeconomic conditions deteriorate, you start having all the problem of dual labor market with a lot of layoffs taking place. So the honeymoon, unfortunately, as the real honeymoon, does not last forever.
Do you think that the Great Recession will make governments more aware of that kind of risk, how to deregulate or re-regulate labor markets, or is the Great Recession posing more risk that that kind of two-tier reforms that lead to honeymoon and duality will be implemented?
Well, during the Great Recession we certainly had the bad lesson from this dualism. In countries like Spain we had very strong reduction and 2 million jobs being destroyed very rapidly simply because they were under this contract, and all the risk was concentrated on the young people. We also had these very bad examples of sectors with a very large downscaling of temporary contracts and the wages of the permanent contract holders increasing at the same time. So certainly the problem related to dualism, I think, were very well documented, I would say. This doesn't mean necessarily that governments are going to tackle this issue, because clearly the interests of the holders of permanent contracts are very well protected, and governments are scared about facing strong political opposition when they carry out these reforms. Still, I think it's very important to talk about it and really to indicate that this dualism is very is very dangerous. In the long term, it will have very negative effects.
The last one, and today we discussed the idea of a single contract, and you've been also writing about it and showing how it works and so on. To some people it is kind of like a paradigm shift. It's not a parametric change, it's a complete change in how you think about labor law contracts. And how do you see this idea spilling over Europe over the last few years. Is it really getting attention, or is this kind of aversion of policymakers to something completely new, like we've seen today? Is it really that aversion which overwhelms the freshness of the idea?
Well, this was an idea that was developed by labor economists. We did it in reference to Italy, other person, Pierre Cahuc and Francis Gramarz in France, Juan Gimeno, Samuel Bentolil and others in Spain. And so it is spreading also intellectually, I would say, but still it had received quite a lot of attention also in policy discussion. In Spain we were very close to adopting the single contract in a variety of forms. In Italy it is now in the draft bill for the disegno, and a proposal, a detailed proposal is at the upper chamber. So I think it's not that far from being implemented. You know, perhaps we need to have someone to push it, to have it done. But it's certainly something that has. It acknowledges the fact that there is a need for flexibility, that there are important asymmetries in the labor market. I think